Almost good to go.
What are you live casting on?
Facebook.
Okay. Our member site, Facebook.
No, just public. Okay, I think everything is good to go. And either way, we have backup of one to the other and back and forth. So let's go. Our conversation today, we were going to talk about really developing character and discipline with students, all the various character development aspects and so forth. And it seems to me kind of the starting point here, Master Smith, is martial arts schools, and I forget when the transition was, but somewhere along the line is the focus went from we're going to teach you how to fight to we're developing character, self-esteem, confidence, all those buzzwords. Probably happened, industry-wide, kind of around the first Karate Kid movie, early '80s. I know long before that, Junri was leading that charge, and then Junri and Nick to an extent was leading that charge. But it's always seemed to me that most martial arts schools put that on the front window. They put that in their advertising, but then they don't really do much of anything about it, right? They teach people, kids or adults, they teach them a lot of physical techniques and one thing or another, brag about how it develops confidence and focus and discipline. In reality, they're teaching them an awful lot of physical stuff. And we know that the athletic development does create, mental benefits, but really they didn't have any systems in place to show, in the case of kids, the parents, what the outcome was, and in the case of adults, to show them what the process was to develop that. Is that a fair way to say it?
Well, I would add a few more things.
Yeah.
Grandmaster June Ree was really the first person to really, really emphasize that and make it part of the curriculum. And probably his best quote that summed it all up is, learning martial arts without character and discipline is just teaching street fighting. And all we did was take his initial character training and academics and things like that and expanded it into actual written materials and reading materials that the students could even get just as much of the physical. We never stopped on the physical side. We had some of the best fighters and forms competitors in the country, and he was teaching his brand of discipline and character development, what we now call life skills, but it didn't have visible ways to measure that they were all doing it. We were hoping they were getting lessons at the school, but what we found was that anytime you train somebody in just one area on something, well, they might do it when they're there, but as soon as they leave, maybe not. By the time they get to black belt, yes, but in the process. So what we started doing is finding that if we could put systems together where they could do these things at home, then the parents could really see that they're getting, because half the parents don't stay and watch the classes, so they don't really know they're getting it. A lot of the beginners tend to stay and watch, but once they get out of the beginners, most of them don't. So it's real helpful to have those things at home. And then we wanted to make it even more visible by putting stripes on their belt when they completed assignments, because that way the instructors could actually see who was doing it and who wasn't. Originally, we had just decided that we would just do it when they did their belt test, but then if they weren't doing it, it was too late. So once we started the stripes and then requiring a certain amount of those character stripes to be able to test along with the physical. But the important thing, I think, for most martial arts schools to understand is that you don't compromise your physical. Hopefully you have a good physical program going, but you're adding this on as a supplement, and that's what increases your value tremendously. It's almost like the difference between a private school and a public school. They both teach the academics, but there's a higher level of respect and discipline and things that you can't get away with at a private school that you could get away with at a public school.
Yeah. Well, and to expand on that even more is over the years what we've done is continue to increase the physical performance expectations, right? Is it's not about watering anything down. Now, as far as curriculum design, and we can circle back around to that, but I do find a lot of schools they try to teach too much in the first year and maybe not have high enough expectations of what somebody can accomplish by the time they're black belt. So as far as actually designing even the physical abilities that you're going to teach them and the everything from the forms or the movements to the physical expectations. Really, what you have to do is take the long-term approach of, just like in academics, where are they going to be by middle school, where are they going to be by high school, where they're going to be by college, not so much what are they going to get in first grade or in kindergarten. But let's go back to the character development side. Is what you're talking about is what we started adding sequentially over the years were, first mat chats. So, and what I mean by that is, just presentations on goal setting, on follow through, on discipline, incorporating into everything that we were teaching, not just the blocking or the choke hold or the takedown or whatever it might be, but lessons incorporated throughout the classroom, again on life skills, but on how to create better discipline, on how to be more self-motivated, on how to set long-term goals, on how to feel better about yourself, how to use self-talk, how to use visualization, and so forth. So we gradually developed a complete curriculum of these lessons, and not that an instructor was sitting there and doing a 30-minute lecture to kids or adults, but it was dripped throughout the lesson, and then we would bring them together and have a real focus. And at some level, a very high level, the leadership program and then ultimately the instructor program in a very highly organized, very robust with homework and reading assignments and textbooks and so forth. But at the lower level, where they were bringing every class, they were being brought together and talking about a life skill lesson and how to set goals, how to follow through, and so forth. And then, in addition to that, started rewarding the students for things they were doing at home and things that they were doing at school. So all of a sudden, junior started the requirement to be at least a B or an A student in order to get your black belt. And then you started, and I started bringing it down to no. What we're also going to do is we're going to send home, have the kids bring in the report card and give them rewards on their uniform, give them stripes. We're going to have them do homework assignments at home and give them stripes as a reward for that. Ultimately, that morphed into every belt graduation. There were trophies and medals and awards that they were given for having completed a certain number of job lists that they were doing at home, or a certain number of self-discipline sheets, or a certain number of homework assignments, or even for eating in a more healthy way and showing that responsibility. So let's talk about that. Is starting right at the introductory process and introducing this to the parents. And as you said, all of this material really doubles or triples the value of the program in a parent's mind. And by the way, we start all this stuff with adults, not with kids, but for the kids, it doubles or triples the value in the parent's mind, makes them much more willing to pay a higher tuition, makes them much more willing to be actively involved. So let's talk about where we start right there at the introductory process and then work our way up from there.
Well, and I guess it starts with the biggest sign we want in the school, and that is we are a black belt school. And we want to get that across so they know when they come in that this isn't something they're going to do for just a few months, but this is a black belt school. Our goal for you, for all of our beginner students and new students, is for them to set their goal for the black belt and beyond. And when we work them and use black belt verbiage in the class, say things that anchor in those goals, we teach them with something very visible, which is a vision sheet that we will introduce in the regular class. But in the intro, what you're trying to do, you don't want to overload them with too much stuff in that intro, because then they think like, oh, well, that's going to be too much. All we hit in that intro, as far as the character and the things that we want them to do, is we want them to know the 4 laws of concentration. Focus your eyes, focus your ears, focus your mind, and focus your body. And then explain to them what those things mean. And then the parents get very impressed with that, because that's one of the hardest things that we find for the younger kids when they come in, is they don't have focus. They don't have much concentration. So this is going to teach them how to do it just by using those 4 laws and explaining what those are. And then the next step, if they're doing that, then we want to make sure that our kids have respect. It's one of the missing elements besides focus. That respect is one of our lost arts. There used to be a lot more respect at school for teachers, for adults, for fellow students. So we want them to get back to the yes sirs and the no sirs, or the yes ma'ams or the no ma'ams, or the thank you or the you're welcome or the please. So we have our 7 words of respect that we want them to learn, and we get that across right from day one. And then, of course, we're going to teach the self-defense skills. We're going to teach them some blocking and punching and kicking in that first intro. But we also have to get those things across with the discipline and the respect. And then to make sure the parents get the gist of what we're doing when they come back for their second class, because the first one is a semi-private class. It's not in the regular class. That doesn't work. They will get swallowed up in that class, and they'll feel overwhelmed, and you won't get as many enrollments. But if you do a semi-private, so everybody in there, you get a chance to develop rapport and explain all these, focus and discipline. And then at the end, we tell them when they come back for the next class, they're going to get a chance to do a real class and with the basic beginner program. And when they're in that class, when they come back, they'll have a chance to earn their white belt by doing a few things. And it's usually 2 or 3 things. Some schools are a little different. But the one that is uniform on all of them is that they have to demonstrate self-discipline at home. And we give them a little sheet to fill out that has 3 things that they're going to do around the house to help mom or dad without them asking. Well, when they come back the next class, some schools have them also memorize the first line of the student creed or the whole student creed, or learn the rules of the school. But we know when they bring that self-discipline sheet back in that next class, we have an 85% closing ratio on those people, because we know the parents have already bought into our program, because they're already going to be impressed, because 95% of the kids these days don't do those things around the house to help their parents. So when we can get them to do it by saying it in one class, I hear it all the time from the parents, is they were so impressed, because they've been trying to get them to straighten up their room or help with the dishes or take out the trash or whatever, the little help they do around the house. And they gave up on it because it became an argument every time. They made so many excuses. Oh, I was going outside to play with Tommy, I'll do it later. Or it's brother or sister's turn to do it, I did it last time. Or I'm playing video game, I'll do it later. All these other excuses they come up with. So when we teach them and make it part of our curriculum, now the kids want to please the instructors. They want to get the medals or the trophies or the stripes on their belt or the praise that we give them when they bring those things in, and we award them those stripes at the end of class. It becomes very impressive. And when the parents, even if the parent didn't do it, when they come in and they see how many other kids are doing that, they're going to be impressed, even if their kid didn't do it. Because there is a few that need another class or two to because they were real stubborn. But when they see that the majority of the students are doing that, they're going to go like, wow, I can't believe they did all of that. And then we're calling out some of the other things that they're doing in the class, such as your self-discipline book club, or or your healthy eating or your job list or your practice sheet, but those kind of good habits that we want them to develop at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And and so it's being introduced right at the beginning, and then we will sit down right after the enrollment. We sometimes call it the folder conference, but really what it is a little orientation conversation. And it can be one on one, or it could be everybody who's new for the week so far. But we're walking them through the
And
homework.
just to clarify,
Yeah,
Master Oliver, you said it, but maybe they didn't catch it. You don't do it on the enrollment conference.
right.
Go over the folder. The enrollment folder has all of those sheets and all of your requirements for testing and rules and how to qualify for black belt training. I mean, it's a whole layout of pre-framing them to get them to buy into becoming a black belt and setting their goal for it. So it has to not be on that class that you're signing them and doing the paperwork, but you set up at a separate time the following class or two to when they have time to stay. And when we do it, like you said, you can do 2 or 3 people, new people at the same time, because it doesn't have to be one-on-one, because they're all in the same folder and they're already signed up. So it's just going over our procedures.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen schools. Sometimes they're very elaborate. Who'd have a manual or a book or something that they give the new students. Often, sometimes it's a notebook, and all that is wonderful. What I see too many times is it's focused more on you're going to learn this physical move, this physical move. Here's how the form works, or whatnot. Well, what we're talking about is here's the various character development elements. Here's how you get rewarded for it. Here's the various aspects of how the program evolves long term. Here's the process to set a goal, to follow through long term and be a black belt and so forth. And then here's just how the overall system works. And it certainly includes going through their ID card. So we'll go through our testing cycle is every 2 months. So we'll go through what we want to do is have 16 lessons every 2 months. That's twice a week. Anytime you miss a week, we'll want to do some makeup classes. And here's where your ID card will be. Here's what this means. We'll be making sure we're staying on track. Here's when the belt graduation is going to be. We're giving them the date and the time. That's the target. So from day one, we're giving them the goal of attendance. We're giving them the goal on character development activities, ways that they're going to get rewarded incrementally, and ways they're going to get rewarded at the testing cycle. And then we're teaching them about the overall process. It's just like being a freshman at college. You're teaching them here's what's required to graduate and get your bachelor's. Here's what's required to get your master's. Here's the process that you go through to set the goal and be accepted to those next levels and so forth. So we're prepping and pre-framing for the renewal, prepping and pre-framing family add-on and referrals, prepping and pre-framing for all the different character type of lessons that we want them to be doing at home and in the karate school and or the martial arts school and at school. And so walking them through all those pieces. And again, it's not a 2 hour process. It's a 10 or 15 minute process, but really prepping and making sure they understand all that stuff and then getting action taken. Between now and next time, why don't we do this discipline sheet? And, let's set a goal by this time next week to have completed your first job list and walking them through that kind of material. What else would you add to that, Ms. Smith?
And also the attendance card is in there, and we show them how that works. And we use the simple 3-card box system, and you and I have both have tried all kinds of system, from the barcodes to scanning to iPads and every other form, trying to find what we call the magic formula for better retention. And we find with the attendance cards, because if you do it properly, at the end of the night who wasn't in class because their card is still in box 1. And on the card, it has the 2 days they're supposed to be there. So if it says Monday and it's still in box 1, because once they come to class, the first class, box 1 is first class this week. They pull their card out of box 1, which is alphabetized with the little dividers A through Z. They pick it out, bring it to class, we'll mark it, and then we put it back in box 2 at the end of the night or the next day. And by pulling it out and lining up with it, we don't just have them pull the card and then put it in a pile, because then we don't know that everybody did bring a card. So there's little easy things that you do in there. And even the instructor holding the cards and looking at them as the class is going to see who's behind, uh, looking at their belts to see if they have the character stripes on their belts. These are all part of being a great instructor, and is how we've been able to get some of our top schools to get their retention with a dropout rate of only 1, 2, or 3%.
Yeah, yeah. And what I imagine is some of the more technically literate guys like myself are sitting back and going, well, we have computers to do that, and we have software to do that, and so forth. And you already said it, but just to emphasize, what we want is three things. One is we want to be able to interact with a student when they're live in the school in front of us, and have a good tracking record of their progress, stripes they've been given, when their test date is, whether they're on track or off track to do that. And the easiest mechanism we've found is that physical ID card that they turn in at the beginning of class. Now, if you want to back it up into a software package, which I always did, what we did is we just printed labels for each of the students for the cards. And maybe nowadays it's a QR code. We were doing barcode scanners, many years ago. And so we would barcode scan each of the cards and it would go in the software. What I always found was the physical cards were more accurate than the software, number one. But number two, what was always difficult is it was difficult to get usable information while you have 30 or 40 students in front of you about their progress updates, about their testing, about how many lessons they had. It was difficult to do all that. I don't want to have an instructor going over to, I don't care whether it's an iPad or an iPhone or a terminal. I don't want them interacting with technology while they have their students in front of them. I don't want them to go have to be looking things up, and I want to have a simple mechanism for that. Number two is it became an easy mechanism for the student in real time when they were there. And, it's fine if you have an app that they can look up their stuff, or if they can log in to your software and see their records or so forth. That's all great, but it doesn't replace the teacher-student interaction when they show up in the school and I'm looking at their progress and giving them feedback. And I can do that with a class of 50 people in an easy fashion, in an organized fashion, and in a person-to-person fashion. The second thing, Master Smith, is the attendance. And what we see a lot of times is, the first time somebody misses a student from class might be when their payment doesn't clear in their billing software. Well, that's the wrong time to be knowing that they're missing. What I want to do is, we have a class at 6:15, and I want to know who's supposed to be there at 6:15 on Tuesday, and know that they're not there. At the very least, what I want to be able to do is by Tuesday or Wednesday know who's missed a class already this week, so that we can personally reach out and follow up. And you certainly can do that with software, and having that as a backup is wonderful. But again, what we find is a lot of schools, even if they're on top of it that much, they leave it up to, the system sends them an email. Nobody gets a warm, fuzzy feeling anymore about an email. Maybe 20 years ago, they thought it was a wonderful thing. But I'm getting spammed daily by text on my iPhone, and I've got 200 emails a day. Most of the ones that I want to see slip through the cracks, and I don't look at. Nobody's happy about looking at their email, but it's that personal touch. It's the instructor, the assistant instructor, sitting down and reaching out to them and say, hey, I noticed you missed your class today at 6:15, or I noticed you missed your class yesterday. Wanted to make sure we schedule a follow-up lesson. Your second class is typically Thursday, so if we can get a follow-up today, or if we get an extra class on Saturday or on Friday, then you'll be on track. And then scheduling that time. So the physical card has so many benefits versus I have to go look up in the system and look at people up individually and try to track down. So it's not that we're neophytes or Luddites or against technology. It's that what we know is a lot of systems that people create. And Matt Smith, I was talking about even some of our old staff members who had been gone for a while and they come back. They were trying to recreate systems that I figured out long ago didn't work very well because it was what you want to know is when the rubber meets the road and I bow in a class of 20 or 30 or 40 people, I need to be able to deal with each one of them individually on the spot when they're in class. And I need to be able to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks and that I'm recognizing anybody who's either falling behind, tapering off on their attendance, or who misses any individual lesson so that there can be personal follow up. And again, automated follow up is great, never gives anybody a warm feeling. It's a human being following up with a human being that creates quality retention. What would you add to that?
Well, and I tell you, even for our members who I've been to their school and they had the cards, I saw that they really weren't keeping up with them. Maybe they just had their name on there and maybe their phone number. I want all this stuff filled out. I want their email address. I want their phone number. I want their date of birth. I want when they enrolled. I want to know what program they're on. I want to know when the expiration date is. I want to know what days they're coming to class. And then on the cards, I see some of them will have the classes numbered like 1 through 20 or however many classes they're requiring, and then just do a little check mark like they're coming to class. And that doesn't do anything helpful. What we need to know is the exact date and when were they there. So every time you mark their card, you have to mark the exact date they were there. Then while the class is warming up, I can be glancing through the cards and I can see when somebody is behind on their lessons. This is their third week in the program. I can see when they started and I know what date it is. So I can estimate how many classes they should have had. And if they're behind, then while we're warming up, I'll mosey on over there and just tell them we need to schedule a makeup class and have your moms or parents see us in the office after class. And then all of that's what I call prevention versus cure. You see, the way you keep students in the school is by keeping track of them. The way you keep them in the school is not letting them get behind. And if they go a couple weeks and you haven't contacted them, every week that they're gone, there's even less chance of them ever coming back, even when you call them. So that's why you got to catch them right on that time. The very, if not that night, because we don't like to call too late. So sometimes the basic class is a little later, but most of them are earlier, 4:30, 5:30 or something like that. So even after that basic class, those are the ones that aren't habituated to the schedules yet. And those are the ones you really got to stay on top of right away. The reason people drop out is only two reasons. One, they're not passing their test or they quit coming to class. Well, why did they quit coming to class? Well, if you don't call them, you don't know. And some schools say, well, my instructor doesn't have time to call them because he doesn't come in till 3 o'clock and nobody's home, or, there's all kinds of excuses. But it doesn't have to be the instructor. But if somebody else is calling them, and it could be an office assistant, it could be the program director, whoever's calling them, assistant instructor, what they're always going to say is, Master so-and-so, whoever your head instructor is, asked me to give you a call because he noticed you weren't in class and he just wanted to make sure you were okay. See, we're calling from concern. And if you call from concern and not just, I'm calling because you missed class and I want to keep you on cycle to get your next belt. No, I called because I thought something might have happened. Oh, no, we had something come up and blah, blah, blah. Well, then I say, oh, great, I'm glad to hear that. We want to keep him on track so we can make sure he's going to be on cycle to graduate with the rest of his classmates. So could we schedule a makeup? And then we try to do a makeup. Well, just having that little bit of conversation And then I always end it with a friendly, and you got to be careful how you say this. You say, if you could do me a favor, the next time, if you're not going to be able to make your scheduled class, if you could do us a favor and just give us a call. And that way we don't have to call you, and you can call us and schedule a makeup so we keep you on track. So our goal is to try to get everybody. And of course, when we do the enrollment folder, we emphasize if you're not going to make one of those classes, you're going to miss it, to give us a call. But a lot of that goes in that ear and out the other. So if we're calling them, we're always going to give them that friendly reminder about giving us a call. And that way, half of your people will start calling you, and it will reduce your number of calls. But of everything, it'll increase your attendance. But another thing, and I don't know if I said it, so I want to re-emphasize it. On that card, on that attendance card, you should also have what their current belt is and when their next belt test is. So that way they see the date that they're working towards, and they're going to know they need X amount of classes by that time. So I keep reminding of that. So that way they start self-correcting themselves, and they'll start scheduling makeups. They'll start coming an extra class to make up for the class they missed last week, etc.
Yeah, yeah. And you said it buried in there as well, but let's reemphasize it. The hardest belt, the hardest time to keep them going is when you get them started, right? It's right at the beginning. It's a white belt. You're working on getting them in the habit, getting them comfortable with all the staff, the assistant staff, getting them to know other people in class, getting the attendance to be a regular habit in their schedule. See, that's the most important. And then the second most important is the next belt level up, and getting them through that first year is the most important all the way around. If I can get them through their first belt or their second belt and get them where they're committed to train to black belt and beyond, and really thinking long term, it becomes progressively easier to keep them on track, to keep them on schedule. They start to have where most, and if not all, of their peer group or other students in class, they're coming down to class, greatly to see their friends and to see the instructor and so forth. It becomes easier and easier and easier, but that it's that white belt level that we have to put the best people on, the most focus on, schedule their appointments, call and confirm the appointments, remind them, make sure they get on track. We have to explain the same things multiple times because, again, if you hit me with 32 things to learn about the school all in one sitting, I'm not going to remember much of it. So I've got to keep teaching them about how the ID card works and about the attendance, and keep reminding them of people's names, and keep reminding them of processes and spurring them to get started. So again, that's I think the thing that a lot of people miss. They put like their worst instructor or their youngest instructor on the white belts, where really it's the white belts that if you get them started off strong, get them to set the goal and get them to follow through, everything becomes easier from there. But it's a real difficult process to get them up to speed well. Going back to all of the character development lessons and all the
Before you go back,
yeah,
Master Oliver,
yeah,
let me just tag on to what you just said, because what happens with the students uh, when you haven't gotten them in the habit, and I've done this with the majority of our schools that are in our association, our group, our mastery group, and we have found that 80% of the dropouts. Now, this is the dropouts, not 80% of your students, but 80% of the ones who haven't been there. And now remember, a dropout is considered they haven't been there for 30 days. We found that 80% of those dropouts happen in the first 4 months. So if you can solve that, you'll automatically be down to the 2-3% or lower.
yeah, yeah. If you can solve your dropout rate at the first 4 months, and you can get people in the first 4 months, preferably the first 2 months, committed to train to black belt and beyond. And we've seen in looking at the stats, the dropout rate might be 5%, and then once they renew, it's 0.5%, right? It's that dramatic a difference. Once you've gotten in the habit, they've set the goals, and they've gotten to the second or third belt, then it becomes much easier to maintain that pace. Doesn't mean you take your eye off the ball or let anybody slip through the crack, but it becomes a much easier process. Going back to the all of the character development aspects, and it's I see schools where they've gotten a little bit of the idea, and they're maybe they do a little chat in class about things, or every now and then they give a handout on a lesson or something. But really, what we've done is we've incorporated it into every aspect of the program. Is that a fair way to say it? Is every aspect of the program. When they come into class, they're going to see we're talking about what the lesson is today or this week, and there's going to be a chat and a conversation about that. Then what's going to happen is at the end of the classroom or the class, everybody's getting stripes. They're getting stripes for new character development lessons. They're getting stripes for all kinds of different achievements. They're getting rewarded for how they're doing in school. They're getting recognized for going above and beyond at home. So there's an element of their being recognized every time. Then there's homework assignments that are going home that the parents for the kids are helping with, or the adults are taking care of. So you've got assignments, you've got recognition, you've got conversations in the school about the various lessons. And then at different levels, we have even textbooks that go along with it. So there's reading requirements, and some at the higher levels, especially written tests that go along with it. So it's every aspect of the program is wrapped in as many different areas as possible that they're going to get that material. And I'm not sure there's one that's more important than the other, but it's the getting them to take action is the key on all of these things. And getting them to take actions can either be with rewards or punishment. If I have a third degree black belt and they have to read 4 textbooks and do written tests, maybe it's enough that that's a requirement for your third degree black belt, and you have to prove that you did it before you test. But if it's a white belt, I need to have them getting rewarded every time they walk in for taking small little actions and doing improvements. I want the parents to see that. I want the child to feel that reward. And I want there to be constant reinforcement just to get them to move a little bit and do a little bit of action. What would you expand on that?
Well, I think when you're teaching a class, uh, a lot of schools fail to have a structured class. In other words, they just wing it every class. There should be, you should have it broken out where I'm going to do warm ups for 8 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And then I'm going to cover this part of the curriculum. Then I'm going to cover that part of the curriculum. And if I go through my class and I have all my instructors like that, and I have my mat chats in there, uh, while they're doing any one of those activities, we've got to be using black belt verbiage in there. We've got to be talking to them about a black belt is a white belt who never quits. How many of you would like to be a black belt someday? Boom, boom, boom. Say, okay, all you got to do is not quit. Stick with your goal. Now, remember, and then my next conversation, maybe in the next exercise, is I'm going to talk about any goal that you put down has to be in writing, and it has to be visible where you see it every day. So we then talk about our vision sheet that they fill out that says when they're going to be, what degree, and a date. And then it's going to have little bubbles. It's a flying kick with their head. They cut a picture out and put their head on there. Those little things are so important because that's what's setting the visual of their goals and helping them stick with the class, because they're that vision sheet, when they finish filling it out, and it has the flying kick, when they're going to get to be the black belt, it has what they're going to be like. And then there's a bottom section where we have the parents fill in how they want to see the kids. Well, then we make sure that kid is developing in those things in particular. And we know they're going to get all of them anyway, but if there's some in particular, we might put up more emphasis on that so the parent sees that we're taking that kid under our wing and making sure that they're getting what they came there for. So these are the little things that great instructors who have great retention, and I said it before, but I want to say it here just because we're talking about this. I never judge the quality of an instructor by my personal opinion of how he's teaching the class as much as I look at his dropout rate. And then if he has a problem, he's got too many dropouts, then I start analyzing the class and finding out why he has so many dropouts. And then a lot of those things that we were talking about, they haven't been doing. They haven't been doing the mat chats. They haven't been using the black belt verbiage. Their school doesn't even have signs all over that have the black belt verbiage, because there should be signs all over. To be a black belt, you got to train like a black belt. A black belt is a white belt who never quits. I mean, putting those kind of signs, and I'm talking professionally looking signs, not just putting it on a piece of paper and sticking it up there, but something that's framed or matted or a core form board or something that looks professional, because now they're getting subliminal messages, not just from what the instructor says, but seeing it around the school.
Yeah, yeah. And to go back on that, what you're always wanting to do is to see the students taking action. And again, you talked about how you read an instructor. I always looked at three factors for all the instructors. One was what the dropout rate was, and we were starting with every week looking at how many are 1 week inactive, how many been gone, didn't come in last week, were there the week before, how many were 2 week inactive, how many were 3 week inactive. So one measurement is the dropout rate. The second measurement is the renewal rate. What percentage of our white belts are committing to train to black belt and beyond? What percentage of our gold belts, if they hadn't already, are committing to train to black belt and beyond? And if the percentages were off, I was always holding them accountable for 75% or more. We wanted 75% of everybody enrolled to make the commitment to train to black belt and beyond. But if the renewal rates were off, or if the dropout rate was too high, and those two worked directly together, there was a problem. The next was the testings. And we were always looking at the belt testing. How many people should be on time and on track for this particular belt? Is it 98% already, or was it 75%, or was it 60%? If there was a gap there was a problem too. Ideally, you want to have 100% of everybody who should be graduating to the next level be ready. And of course, the instructors will give you all kinds of excuses. They weren't ready. They hadn't been practicing. Well, I hold the instructor accountable for that, right? So if I'm a good instructor, I have internal locus of control. I'm taking responsibility for following up, motivating, getting them excited, helping them set goals, helping them understand the process, and getting them to take incremental action. But those were the three factors I always looked at. Is I looked at retention, renewal rate, and the testing cycles. And not only if the students were on time when they're supposed to test, but also the quality. And how much of it was quality? Well, it depends on what stage the student is in. If it's a white belt testing for gold belt, I'm not expecting the same thing as I'm expecting for brown belts testing for black belt. So there is a spectrum on when I'm going to be expecting a certain performance physically, but I'm certainly looking for graduation on time. I'm looking for renewal rates, and I'm looking at that dropout rate. Anything you would add to that?
Well, the important thing to remember is that when they sign up, you should be putting when their next belt test is. So it's written right on the card. Since it's written on the card, we always had an actual up on the wall where the students could see it, instructors, everybody could see it. We called it our 3-month testing cycle. And so it had everybody that was testing this month, everybody that was testing the next month, and everybody was testing the next month. Because by the end of, let's say this is July, by the end of July, all those people are either going to be testing in August or they're going to be testing in September. So I keep updating it as the months go and I keep adding to it. Then we go through, once the list is up there, the beginning of every month, I have the instructors go through the attendance cards and actually write down how many lessons they have, even if it's the first month, the second month, or the third month, to see if they're on track to be ready for their testing. And if they're behind, then they've got to call them or catch them in class and talk to the parents and schedule the makeup classes to keep them on cycle so they test on the month that's up there. We also educate the students and we tell them, make sure that you look at your name on the wall. And if it looks like you can test early, because you're going to have enough lessons the month before, because there is a gray area when people join later in the month than the people who join earlier in the month, but they can come a little more often to make up those 2 weeks that they started maybe late in July and still be able to test with the people that joined earlier in the month. So we always tell them to make sure that you're on track. At least that's your goal. And if you want to move it, now, if you need it later because you know you have a trip or you're going to have vacation or you're going to have something you're not going to be able to be in here, then let us know too so we can put it in the right one. Well, once we got everybody checking their own date when they're testing and it's on their card and we re-emphasize that in the classroom, we were finding that most of our students that were on that list, 95% of them were testing. But before we did that, it got really bad sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Because even if they didn't test, but they didn't drop out, there's a potential dropout if they miss their testing cycle.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the valuable things about a rotating curriculum, having a set graduation date every 2 months, is it makes it easier for the instructor. Everyone who's in this class should be ready for the graduation, mid-August or mid, October, whatever the month is, and it's easy for them to in their head look and see who's behind, who's on track, and so forth. It makes it a much easier system to implement that way. The next step with the students really continue to grow their focus and development. I really think that we have to evaluate and look at each of our staff, our assistant instructors, our volunteers, our leadership team members, and so forth, and have them really know who everybody is, really have the names memorized. And of course, we have all kinds of systems to make it a little easier. One of the things I always did is I put the name on the lapel, so I can be looking at them. And I've seen other schools put it on the belt. Once you start doing a bunch of stripes on the belt, and I don't like having to look at their crotch to see their name. But you could even do a name tag for beginner students. You can put it on their lapel. You can put the name on the belt. But I want to get all of the hierarchy in the school, certainly the paid staff, but even the sports staff, to know the name of all of the students, of all of the parents, of all the different people who are coming into the school, and of course to teach the students what all the instructors' names are and be comfortable with that as well. Let's talk about that a little bit more. I've used all kinds of systems over the years. What I've never seen is anything better than a combination of using the ID cards and just photos of all the students. So what I always did is I had, back when in fact they're back, but Polaroids were big. We would have a Polaroid of every student and their parents, and on the back we'd have each of the parents' names and the students' names, and we'd use those like flashcards. We would also then do a picture of the student on their ID card. So when I'm looking at the ID card, I've got the picture of them, name, date of birth, all the information you already talked about, so I could connect that. But then what we would go through is, at the minimum every week and sometimes every night, is we would go through all the ID cards, and where we were doing what I called ABC in them. We would go through and ABC the student. ABC, how are they doing on attitude, attendance, engagement? How are they doing on physical skill sets? How's mom? How's mom as far as being engaged and focused and excited, or whining and complaining all the time? We'd ABC mom, we'd ABC dad. When we did the billing monthly, we'd go through the billing report and we'd do the same thing. We'd go through and look at everybody active and inactive, and then ABC the child, ABC the parent. We were constantly looking at everyone to catch waning interest, parents who weren't all that impressed with us, sliding attendance, sliding on the level of effort and enthusiasm in class. Uh, so, what would you add to that as far as really staying on top of the student body and keeping everybody on top of the student body?
Well, some of the key things that you said that are so critical is number one, to have that name visible, but to use that frequently in the class. Call their names, spotlight them, catch them doing something good. Don't spotlight them to do something bad and make them do push ups. Spotlight them when they're doing something good and then have everybody clap for them. By having their ID card and we see their picture, even our assistant instructors who don't know them very well. But when I do a class, if there's more than 15 or a dozen people in the class, I'll divide it into two groups. And even if I have one instructor working both groups, I might have my newer group over here and my more advanced group over here. But if I have two instructors, one will take the cards of that group, and then I want him looking to see if everybody's up to cycle and if everybody has enough classes. And if they don't, they see their picture, they see their name, so they can walk by while the class is going on and then talk about doing makeup or see me after class so we can schedule a makeup, et cetera, et cetera. But that's how you get to know the students. And I've seen probably only 10 or 15% of our schools, Master Oliver, have even gotten where they're putting their picture on it. As much as we emphasize it and how important it is when you see that student and you use their name, even if they don't have it on their uniform, if you have their card with the picture, then you can use it. And I mean, whenever you go to a restaurant, if you're there with your wife or somebody goes in with their wife or girlfriend or whatever, and they know you, oh, hi, Mr. Smith, how are you today? You want your regular table or blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what impresses you. And you go like, wow, I really feel like I found my restaurant. This is kind of my home base. Whereas you come in and they don't come over, you're waiting for 10 or 15 minutes. Well, that's the same thing when somebody walks in your school. You got to be right on them and meet them and greet them as they come in the door if it's somebody you don't recognize. And maybe it's a family member of one of the students, and then you find out who that is, and you say, oh, great, yeah, he's doing awesome. Come on over, have a seat here. And so it's just making people feel at home. A thing that you're really good about that a lot of schools miss out is to make sure that you have, I kind of call it keep your ear to the ground. So you hear what's going on. If somebody had a death in the family or an illness in the family, you're sending them a get well card or flowers or things like that. So, taking a personal interest in the students. And if you call and they weren't there and they tell you that they were injured, he's in the hospital, or we had a wedding that went to, or this or that, and you can send something for that. But that's getting to know the students and sending them those kind of personal touches.
Yeah, yeah. And on a staff training side, I always called it the rules of three. Nobody gets within 3 foot of the front door without being greeted by name. Every class, we're going to use every student and every parent's name at least 3 times. We're going to physically touch appropriately everybody at least 3 times every class. And there's good research on that one, by the way. Adjusting their arm, adjusting their leg, putting your hand up for them to pull their knee up, helping them with posture. The physical touch is a useful one, but using their name at least 3 times every class, being aware of making eye contact. A lot of instructors I see, if you have a class of 30 people, they're teaching like this blob of 30 people. rather than individually working with each person. And I don't mean, you're going over there and 29 people are standing around while you're working with one person, but you're making eye contact with each person in class. You're using their name. As you said, you're spotlighting them. You're pointing out things that they're doing really well. You're highlighting each person in class, but you're engaged with each person. You're walking around and adjusting or touching. So the rule of threes is they're greeted within 3 foot of the door. Everybody gets their name used 3 times every class. Everybody gets touched at least 3 times every class. The other thing you were mentioning is the unexpected recognition and unexpected gifting and so forth. And maybe that's the right way to say it is, if I'm having the conversation with mom and I hear that grandma's in the hospital, the best possible use of any money I could do is grandma gets flowers, from us in the hospital, and or if I find out they missed a week because mom's just had the new baby, they get flowers, for the new baby. And in all aspects, what I'm doing is I'm listening for positive life events. I'm listening for things that are traumatic, a death in the family, hospitalization, that type of thing, to recognize. And it certainly goes the same is true with even referrals, or if they did something nice for us, I want to recognize it with unexpected gifting. What I think even with referrals, what a lot of us do is they say, we have the pro shop over here, and you get 100 karate bucks every time you bring somebody in. Well, great. That's transactional. But if Mrs. Jones has you come down and talk to the Boy Scout pack, and I check with her husband and I find out she loves this spa, and she gets the $150 certificate to her favorite spa with a note that says, "We really appreciate you supporting the school, and it was really valuable for us, and I hope it was valuable for them. Thank you so much." Well, that has a whole different impact, right? Is all of it, and I always like to um, look at, you know, finding something personal. So their favorite restaurant, their favorite spa, whatnot. A good example I remember from years ago. I always use this as a bad example. I'm sure, heard the story, but back when I was spending a fortune on TV advertising, our sales rep showed up at my office one time. I didn't happen to be there, and they gave me a Denver Broncos leather golf bag. Now, you know me well enough to know what's off about that.
You
I
don't play
don't I don't play golf. I'm not into football. I don't follow football. So they gave me a golf bag, but I'm not a golfer, that was red and blue and the whole Broncos thing. And if I had been a football fan who's a golfer, it would have been spot on. So if they had gifted, a huge football fan, has season tickets, and he's out on the course every weekend, they would have hit a home run, right? But for me, it was so off target. It became, and by the way, this is 30 years ago, and it still is the story I tell. But it's so important to have people feel recognized when they're in the school, but then put time, effort, and money into recognizing any and everything that you can. And I'm not talking about your software sends them an email when it's their birthday. I get that from my bank. I'm not impressed that their software, knows that it's my birthday because I gave them the information. But something
But
that's unexpected.
in the class, every month you have people that have a birthday that month, and so if they're in class that week and their birthday's that week, then you make sure that you sing happy birthday and everybody wishes them happy birthday, and that makes them feel good that you recognize those things.
Yeah.
Another one of the things that the instructors miss out, and I see when I go visit the schools a lot, is their attention to detail. When they're teaching a class, they'll have maybe 20 students or 15 or 30 or whatever it is, but there's 3 or 4 of them that are facing the wrong way or doing the wrong technique. And they're like standing right in front of them and they're still not correcting them. Well, and then I see their instructor trainees just standing around and not doing it. So I always made sure that they could look at that class and see if something looked out of place. In
Yeah.
other words, somebody was doing a back punch instead of a front punch. And I'm not talking about the little details, a wrist is bent or your punch is offline a little bit. I'm talking about the big obvious things that the parents notice. And I would have some parents on the sidelines going, psst, psst, Tommy, and trying to tell their kid to turn the other way or do the other hand. In other words, try to do our instructor's job. And those are part of the things of being, on target with your students.
Yeah. Well, and to wrap up here, I guess I would say a couple of things. One is relationship is much more important than most anything else when it comes to really building a solid student body. You want to build esprit de corps. You want to develop a high level quality relationship with everybody. And that's people feeling recognized, feeling respected, and not letting anybody fall through the cracks. The other element is the more that you can show appreciation and the more you can, treat people like family, and that's the things like one of our clients, they're on track for they're already $1 million a year business, but they're on track for $1 million net. They were talking about what is it, Tiff's cookies or something like that. There's a national chain. They were sending people who missed a class or sending people who had anything out, fresh baked cookies baked the same day. They would get there within a 2-hour window. It's a thing that they discovered in their area. We have them here too. I've tried it out. I always use Mrs. Fields. Of course, they show up 3 days later and cold. Not quite the same thing, but sending flowers, sending gifts, sending cookies, all of that kind of stuff to recognize when somebody did something for you, or to recognize when they have some traumatic live event, or to help celebrate job promotion or the new baby or whatever it might be, and being on top and never letting anybody slip through the cracks if they miss the testing, if they miss the class, and so forth, and being right there. And automation is great to help you keep track of things, but don't use that as the sole mechanism for reaching out to people. There's no warm and fuzzy about that. Gifting creates warm feelings in a live human being reaching out. Matt
I would,
Smith,
I
anything to
would
add
say, I
before we
would
wrap up?
say, I would say, lastly, just to summarize and to hit some real important points that we covered, that is, you need that attendance card, physical card with their picture on it, with all that pertinent information. Make sure you're using their name constantly in class, and I call that develop the rapport. You got to develop the rapport with the students so you use their name so much, and then you want to make sure that you connect every kid in your class to the parents. So if I go down the seats and I see every parent, then I want to know that's so and so's kid, parents. That's their parents. That's it. So I know who everybody is, and if I hit somebody that I don't know, then I'm going to make sure that I find out who they're attached to, because I also want to give them some positive feedback on a regular basis with different parents to make sure that I'm connecting and letting them know how well Tommy's doing. They appreciate that, and they really take it. As what you call I call developing that rapport with the
Yeah.
parents and the students.
Yeah, yeah, and the grandparents, the cousin, the aunt, whoever has come down to see the child, learning their name, talking to them, giving them feedback, making them feel welcome. It goes a long way. It really does go a long way. Well, okay, we've covered a lot of ground, Master Smith. Let's call it a day for today, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. Damn, we're good.
Let's see. We are still live. And